Next up, driver was using autopilot incorrectly in recent LA crash of Tesla Model S. It's making the news here. It's not, look, I just have to say, to be fair, any car can crash. Car crashes happen all the time. And Elon will tell you to the end of the world that his cars are going to crash less than cars with humans driving them, right? But it doesn't mean that these don't crash. They do crash sometimes. And it's an interesting topic because it's a different, there's different ethics. It's a different thing. Like the driver can basically say, look, I had the thing on autopilot. And then who are you blaming? It's so weird to figure out what to do, presuming that the individual that he crashed into wasn't responsible. Then the driver's negligence presumably would be the next thing. Then and he was using autopilot. So you see how it gets murky. But the other part of it is kind of around the marketing of autopilot, the name autopilot. So this guy wasn't using autopilot the way that he's supposed to, apparently. Okay, so Tesla doesn't want to take the heat for this because they're like, he wasn't even using it right.
Was he sleeping?
He wasn't sleeping. It's actually quite funny how he responded to the question.
Watching Netflix.
He was asked, he was binge watching. So I'll give you the details here. He had his hands on the wheel for 51 seconds of the final 13 minutes and 48 seconds of the drive leading up to the crash. 51 seconds out of 13, almost 14 minutes. That's not a lot. But you remember when we had the Model 3 in here and we were on the highway? It didn't ask you that often to put your hands on. It just had to check that you were there and alive every so often.
Yeah, putting your hands on, do you just have to just touch it?
You just touch it, and then it'll ask you again in a little while to touch it again. And then they say what's more important is that the driver didn't have his hands on the wheel for all of the last 3 minutes and 41 seconds before the crash. So that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but imagine you're leading up to a crash and you got 3 minutes and 41 seconds to figure it out and you don't notice what's about to happen. So for 3 minutes and 41 seconds, he didn't touch the wheel. And of course, all this information is available after the fact because it's recorded and it has to be. He was asked, what were you doing in those 3 minutes and 41 seconds leading up to the crash? And here's the quote. I was having a coffee and a bagel. And all I remember, that truck, and then I just saw the boom in my face, and that was it. So here's the thing, okay? Tesla can tell you forever to have your hands on the wheel, to be alert, to look forward, and so on. But when they sell you something called autopilot, how are you not going to have your coffee and your bagel, man? Come on. It's called autopilot.
Yeah.
And I get it. It's irresponsible and all the rest of it, but I feel like this is a reality.
So you're thinking the term should be not to be made literal.
Well, that's the argument here on interestingengineering.com where I'm reading this. The argument is that maybe it's time for a rebrand on the autopilot feature because it seems as though in many of these cases, the interpretation of how it's supposed to be utilized is not accurate with the end user. And so there's a communication issue there. Now I know a lot of people, Tesla fans, are going to be like, this guy's an idiot. He shouldn't ruin it for everyone. And there's a point to be made there. There's individuals out there right now, Will, without autopilot, having a coffee and a bagel and not looking at the road, and that could easily bump into this fire truck. And it ain't going to be a news story. It's just, there's another idiot who should have been paying attention. It's only a news story because it's Tesla, because it's high tech, and because a human didn't crash. It wasn't a human. A human crashed because of negligence, but it wasn't a human that actually physically pushed that car into that fire truck. So it's all very interesting. But I kind of agree with this article. If you just called it something else, you could kind of take a step back in terms of responsibility. Autopilot on an airplane, obviously a pilot isn't sleeping on an airplane. It's called autopilot. But there's not any fire trucks in the sky, Will.
Yeah, you can't crash into fire trucks in the
Look,
sky.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it's just it's kind of a human thing. Of course, look, I'm sure on the flip side, Autopilot has saved tons of people who probably would have been doing a more poor job, or who fell asleep at the wheel, or had a little bit of alcohol behind the wheel and shouldn't have. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of those stories, but they don't get the press because this is salacious and you know how that goes. But it's interesting nonetheless. If Tesla just wanted to chill a little bit and take some of the heat off, you could change it from autopilot to sort of pilot, kind of pilot, co-pilot. Did I just get it? Co-pilot. No, maybe it's not that good. Anyway, something like that. And then people are like, okay, that's my co-pilot, but I got to be aware and have the eyes on the road. When I was testing the Model 3, the novelty was still strong. So I couldn't imagine taking my eyes off the road because I was kind of like, woo, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But you can imagine after thousands and thousands of miles and the novelty wears off, and all of a sudden I'm having the coffee and the bagel and I'm taking full advantage.
Yeah.
But it locked you out because you didn't have your hands on it.
Yeah, but it would for this guy too. It would lock you out. He did 51 seconds of 13 minutes. So he would tap it and then go back to eating he was gaming the system essentially. Most people would hold it for a bit, hands off for a bit, hold it for a bit. That's the way it's intended to be utilized. So I don't know, maybe some more education. Ultimately, always pay attention to the road, Will. Even with any form of autopilot or assistance driving, and even cruise control. Mm-hmm. Like, because a lot of cars have adaptive cruise control, which is sort of a form of co-pilot, but they just call it adaptive cruise control, so it doesn't seem nearly as sophisticated.
Yeah.
And it doesn't steer, obviously. But anyhow, there you have it. A Tesla crash. And it couldn't come at a worse time with all the Porsche news and everything else, but I'm sure people will crash those too, and they'll find someone to blame, even though those ones are not banking on the autopilot feature. Nonetheless,